Hi, this is David Boje, and in today's presentation, I'm going to talk about the methodology of deconstruction. Deconstruction is something that Jacques Derrida wrote about, and it's done in philosophical treatments. It's also been done in the work on narrative and story deconstruction. That's what I want to focus on today. Now, I've been teaching story deconstruction since about 1990, and I found it really helpful if I give you steps. Now, that violates Jacques Derrida's thing about there's no steps, this is a style. So, hey, but if you want a simple treatment, this is what you're going to get right here. So let's take it in 8 steps. Step number 1, in any story you have, what are the dualities? Male, female, right? There's followers. Maybe it's has to do with being born in a country and being a migrant into a country. Maybe it has to do with having a lot of power or very little power. Maybe it has to do with age, being of an older age like myself, being of a younger age. That could work either way in terms of the duality, the term that's most important in a particular situation or context. Sometimes elders are respected, such as in India, and sometimes only the younger people are respected in various other countries. Hey, United States, I'm just saying. So when you look at any story, look at the characters in the story and look at the things that they're saying, the themes that are there. And even if you only have one side of the duality, let's say, for example, I'll tell you a story. I was a department head at a university on the West Coast, and we had to choose the next person to fill a vacancy in our department. Now, there had never been a woman hired in that department for many years before I got there and while I was there. So I became head of the search committee, and I put everything together, and there were 100 applicants, right? I pulled out my choice of the top 12, and then we convened the meeting. People hadn't done their homework. I had the top 12. And I said, okay, there's Beth, there's Susie, there's Emily, there's Ellen, there's Francis. And one of the gentlemen said, are these all women? I said, well, they're the most qualified candidates. And then you saw about half of the department males dive into the box to try to pull out some males. What about this guy? He might be as good as the 12 you pulled out. What about this guy? What about that guy? And I said, well, we can discuss all that. But this gives you an example of the dualities that are in there. Now, step 2 is to reinterpret the hierarchy of those dualities and make the marginal term. In my example, women had been marginalized and never been offered a faculty position. And I turned that around and make them the dominant one. That's what I did. And we did hire a woman, and she was fantastic. All right. Now, in my story about hiring the first woman ever in that department, I was the rebel voice. That's the third thing you can do in a deconstruction, is declare a rebel voice. Like, okay, I'll be the rebel, and I'll just pull out female applicants. It was a rebellious act. I did it. I'm guilty. Now, number 4, the other side of the story being told in this dualized and hierarchical relationship between the terms and the rebel voice and the dominant voice. Male voices have been dominant, right? And these steps kind of overlap and they interact, right? If I'm going to tell the other side of the story, it's really nice to have femininity in a department to appeal to over half of your students who are female, right? And it's important to have these voices represented and get many sides to a story. Give you an example. Have you ever been in a manager's office and the manager says, okay, I need to talk to you, I need to reprimand you, put you on leave, fire you, whatever. And you say, well, I want to tell you my side of the story. And the manager says, no, I have all the story I need. I have this, I've got everything documented. I don't need to hear from you. So that's an example, right, of not hearing the other side of the story. And this happens very often in authoritarian organizations, organizations that are run by a strong man, a strong woman, could be either way. And you don't get to tell your side of the story. Very prevalent in authoritarian cultures. Now, there's many sides of the story. Even the story I'm telling you has the side of the woman that was hired, it has the side of the men whose voices I potentially marginalized. So it gets pretty interesting when you do deconstructions. Now, there's a plot here that comes through in stories and narratives, right? So I'm denying the plot that there's no good women candidates, because they'd done this many times before, pulled in the mail, said, oh, we'll never get this woman. Women are hard to hire. This other guy has a few more publications, you know. And so I'm going to deny the dominant plot with a counterplot and say, hey, there's some gender issues going on here. And let's be blunt, there's some racial issues too. You can look at the racial aspects too. So this is a good thing to do if you're doing DEI, right? Diversity, equity, inclusion kind of work. You can do this kind of, what's the plot going on and what are the counterplots? Now, plots are about the future, and in my anti-narrative work, we talk about bets on the future. And there's many bets on the future going on at the same time. So obviously the white males preferred another male, except for me, right? And now I'm the counterplot. Now, once we hire more females and we get some balance in the department, it's easier for those counterplots to have weight in a conversation or hiring decision. It's resource allocation decision, class scheduling, whatever. Number 6, find the exception to the dominant principles, universals, essentialism. So essentialisms are characteristics, like we need male characteristics to control the classroom, or men are always better at this than women, or women are always better than this than men, whatever the case may be. But you can find the exception to this. So in my story, I'm the exception. I'm that department head that's coming in and saying, I think I'll just choose female candidates and break the logjam. So things start to happen. Number 7. One of the things you can do in deconstruction, and again, I'll reiterate, it's a style. You use the steps very skillfully. You may not even use them in the order that I'm giving them to you, but I think dualities is a good place to start. But we can trace what's between the lines, like what's not being said in a department meeting or a board meeting, a meeting about innovation. What's not being said? So I was in a university and a woman was about to be fired, who is our department secretary. I'm not going to tell you what university it is, okay? You're not going to pry it out of me. And come to find out, she was being harassed by somebody in the printing department, running printing presses, etc. And this person kept coming over, asking her for dates, saying she was good looking. Oh, what a wonderful body you have, etc., etc. So this woman went up the chain of command, complained to the dean of the college. And the dean said, oh, we're going to deal with that. I'm just going to lay you off and you're going to have to find another job. Well, we've dealt with this guy before. I'm not going to take that on. So between the lines, there's a racial issue. It's sexual harassment. It tells you that the university is not enforcing policies that are in place. It tells you that this particular leader would rather let sexual harassment going on than to deal with it in an equitable and fair way. Now, number 8 is the resituation. Now, this is often the step. I've worked with a lot of doctoral students, and a lot of them don't do the resituation. They're really good at critique and criticizing. Oh, these are the gender issues. These are the racial issues. These are the issues about power, who has it, who doesn't. This is who gets a voice, who gets a seat at the table, etc. But then when you resituate, you want to intervene so there's change. And in the example I gave you, I resituated by intervening, pulling out women candidates, advocating for women candidates on their merits. Not because they were women, but because they had the best resumes, which they did. And resituating meant that over time, as women were hired in that department, the whole atmosphere and climate of the department changed. And that's an example of resituation. So I'm going to show you some of the books I've written, storytelling organizations, quantum storytelling consulting with Mabel Sanchez. There's books you can see, but the Narrative Methods book that is my most famous one by Sage Publishers, a postmodern management book just for undergraduates. And it also had the deconstruction steps. Hey, you know what? Deconstruction is learned more easily by undergraduates. Head's not full, like some of our PhDs and some of our faculty. And in the case I gave today, faculty that wouldn't hire a woman unless they absolutely had to deal with the issues, like I had them deal with the issues. So this is David Boje, and I'm telling you a little bit about storytelling. Narratives are kind of stuck in a particular theme, particular dominant dualities, particular plot line. So it's really easy to start to deconstruct them. When you get into more polyphonic storytelling, as Mikhail Bakhtin talked about them, you have, like in a symphony, many voices, many kinds of plots and subplots. You might have seen my work on Tomorrowland, where in any organization, there's not just one department, but many departments, a boardroom, there's a customer desk, technical desk, and all these different rooms have dynamics going on, storytelling dynamics, where deconstruction can happen. And remember, you can't be in every room at once. Like the story I told you about the dean. He couldn't be in the print shop and in our department with the secretary we had, but he made decisions that violated all 8 of the steps: duality, reinterpreting hierarchy, rebel voice, telling the other side of the story, denying the dominant plot, finding the exception, tracing what was being between the lines, the unspoken. The unspoken is really important. And then doing the resituation intervention. So have a wonderful day. That's my dog barking.